Hey fellow skeptics, Lester the Skeptic Tank here. Just some updates. So, life update. Saw the cardiologist or went to the cardiology clinic. Talked with a nurse practitioner about the results of my echocardiogram. She said, great! Saying my ejection fraction, and that's a metric that had been asked about by my peers, friends, especially within my own parish, where we have plenty of physicians, and some of my family friends who happen to be nurses. And so she said it's back to normal, which, based on the 65% rating, I suppose that's normal function. So I'm counting my lucky stripes and I can go back to cardiac rehab, which has been helpful steadily and surely. Can't complain. It was better than I anticipated. I've been joking about, well, my spirits are good. I feel good. I think I'm good. But we'll see what the results say. So there's that. I appreciate the commentary and the well wishes about my TV, the TV tuner card I had put a video out for the other day. Results. Interesting insights I've gained in my life of using Windows 10 and moved on to Windows 11. Something that you guys may or may not have to worry about, particularly for those who are in that PC master race, as Brandon the Anime Guy likes to dub himself, especially for those who grew up, who still build their own PCs. And I kind of learned this the hard way when working the tuner adapter in my Linux environment. When I started using Windows NT 2000, I resorted to websites back in the days, like, I think it's still around, maybe it's not, I haven't looked it up. NT Compatible was very popular at the time when I was doing my research. And that's one thing you'll notice, especially when you were within that computing divide, if you want to call it that, between the consumer or home edition or the professional edition of the Windows divide. And yes, there's a bit of that, but it's not as distinct. For those uninitiated, especially those who just started coming around the PC gaming world, so I'm going to talk in stereotypes. If you wanted a game, you had to run a combination of DOS, Windows 95, 98. As you got to Windows 2000, which was, I think, underappreciated, and I thought they could have done a lot more with it. Now, again, in terms of what the vision was back in the day when Windows 2000 was billed as this bridge between the consumer line and the business line. And something about Windows 2000, I think I spoke about this on older videos, but it had a flair to it which provided a bit of coolness, but it was sleek. It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't. Now, with Windows 2000, they were trying to bridge the gap between the consumer and business lines of product. So, when you were a hardcore gamer, you were running Windows 95 and especially 98, and more especially 98 Second Edition. That was like the pinnacle Windows you had to run if you considered yourself a gamer, because it was almost guaranteed any hardware you threw at it, it was going to be detected by Windows. Now it would just be a question of how reliable would it be hardware wise, and then the software allowing Windows to talk to that device driver wise. That would be the question. For Windows NT 2000 to a less degree, because of the attempts within that vision, they had something 98 lacked, which was called the hardware abstraction layer, or HAL. And it was a way to shield bad hardware or bad drivers from the operating system, and it would mitigate occurrences of system crashes. Okay? So fast forward to today, particularly with Windows 10, I started noticing this as you started updating Windows 10, particularly when you installed cumulative updates, and you'll notice that different builds be presented as an update. And as I started observing, my hardware I had previously purchased would stop being part of the compatibility listing. So that, especially when you're kind of on the bleeding edge with Windows 2000 back in the day, you had to do a lot more homework in terms of what hardware was compatible with Windows. So I started learning that, particularly when I went from one build to another. I noticed that my serial attached SCSI adapter or SCSI card was no longer on the compatibility list, and they should have done this ages ago with Windows 98 to Windows 2000. They had put out what's called a compatibility checker. I wish they had done something like that for those who wanted to go from 98 to 2000. I think that would have at least raised awareness. Okay, you have to ask yourself, what is your end state? Like, you want it to be, usually you would look into what you want to do on your computer. I wanted to play this or that game. So you just went in and got the best parts for what you could afford at a given time. You didn't have to worry about what your operating system would support. Now, that would kind of, on the flip side, give you greater awareness of what you're putting in your system. And yeah, it would involve more homework. So, Windows 11 had this game as well. Going back to compatibility checker, they would do that for people going from Windows 10 to Windows 11. They continued the same theme of having people run a compatibility check, which is great. Okay. It wasn't like putting a gun to your head saying gotta upgrade. They gave you time, and I don't know when Windows 10 will stop being supported. It may have been already, but I still use Windows 10 on my work computer, so there's that. Crossing my fingers that's still the case. Because I think when I ran a compatibility check, the hardware on my work computer shows that it's not Windows 11 ready, whatever that means. Okay? I might talk to our partner IT for my company. Don't know if I want to go to Windows 11. I mean, I have it. I installed the upgrade for free. Now, going back to Windows 11 and then learning this about the TV card in question, and I know keep going back in circles. I'm going to try to stay on point here. Windows 10 at some point did something when it detected a TV capture card. Now, this is just based on loose research. I could be wrong. But it did give me an insight that I I tried this and I put it in a virtual box. Well, why is that? Because this is where doing my homework would have paid off. I made lemonade out of this lemon of a situation. Normally I would say, what do I need? I need a scanner. Okay, I want to stay in my Linux environment as much as possible. Gotta do the homework, use the appropriate compatibility database, website, whichever you prefer. For Linux users, I think Linux compatible is still good. Or you would go to linuxquestions.org. I think that's the form. But as I did my digging as to why my capture card wasn't detected properly in Linux, it turns out that there hasn't been even an open source driver supply for it. Now my side solution is, and because Windows 10 and now Windows 11, it does not detect my composite inputs. So even though the software installed, it recognized the device, it only recognized the antenna as part of the package, not the composite input. But put it into an older system like Windows XP, doing that, I was able to get it to work. Now, the bigger lesson of it all is I need to keep a better account, because this is what's happening. Yes, I got it to properly detect in my virtual box I've set up with Windows XP. However, my sound isn't working in my Linux environment the way VirtualBox wants it to work. But I've noticed other things that I haven't kept on top of, because I do remember installing a Windows 11 within my VirtualBox setup. The nice thing about VirtualBox is you can kind of get away with certain things, like I can run certain applications without having to boot into my Windows partition. Again, you guys might have heard my narrative about what I have my Windows partition for, which is games. That is probably the only reason why I would go in there natively. And maybe if I wanted to watch movies on Prime in its greatest quality, but nah, I'll just buy a Blu-ray or 4K. But because I've had these quirks with my programs in Linux, and part of my own laziness is I realized I'm going to have to do a nuke and pave with my setup, because off the bat I probably should have recompiled my kernel, or at least when I update it, and I should have properly included it in my boot sequence. And I'll talk more about it. I'll probably start fresh and bare. I'll explain more later as I get up and running, because it doesn't take much for a Linux system to install. And anyway, just thought I'd give you those updates, and again, didn't want to keep you guys too long. So hopefully I'll get it back up and running tonight, and I'll do another video to kind of explain the rationale and how I'm going to try to do this moving forward. Because also, the other side of it is I often did nuke and paving, because sometimes I lose track, or I lose discipline in keeping track of where things are stored. I want to have a better structure in place where I know where my files are, and knowing what's taking up the space. And I'll explain more about my Linux setup. So be on the lookout for that. I know there have been some Slackware Linux seekers. I don't know if they're users, but those who wanted to learn more about Slackware. And I find Slackware still very useful, because like I said in previous videos, I can make it as easy on myself, or I can make it as difficult on myself. And when I make it more difficult for me, I learn. So, alright guys, until next video, fellow skeptics, peace out, and I'll catch you all on the other side.